Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Lazaga.
And I'm Dubside.
And you're listening to the Dubcast with Dubside. Now, Dubside, since we were talking about kids and kayaking recently, in the context of Brian Schultz's project to send school kids from that remote village in East Greenland to the Greenland Games,
Yeah.
that got me thinking about kids and kayaks. Children paddling their own kayaks is not something that you typically see at your standard sea kayaking symposium.
True.
And it seems to be something that's unique to Greenland style events. The reason why, of course, is because you can make a child-sized Greenland kayak and you can custom build everything to a child size, such as the paddle and the spray skirt and paddling clothing. This can be done in a very cost-effective way.
Yeah.
Any thoughts about kids and kayaks?
Well, I think we from what we do in the U.S. here with the kids, we sort of model it after Greenland, because in Greenland, there's only Greenland type of kayaking to do, and kids, they want to get into that, they do that naturally, and they're building things anyway in Greenland, so they can build kid-sized kayaks and kid-sized paddles and kid-sized dewey geeks and everything. It's not as common here, so at some of the events we've tried to encourage that more to get more kids involved.
How do you teach kids kayaking, and is that approach different than teaching adults?
Well, I haven't done a tremendous amount of teaching kids how to roll, but I've done a little bit of things with kids programs at Kayak Academy there in Seattle. They have Barb who runs that with George. They did a kids program, various versions of a kids program for several years going on. And so sometimes I would be there I would stay there while I was in Seattle, and they would each day different things are going on. So they said, tomorrow we've got the kids program, Dubside, you want to come help out with that? So I would go and be there with the kids, and it's different. You have to stay ahead of them mentally, or they'll pull all sorts of little tricks and stunts on you.
Oh yeah.
and there's sometimes, like, I remember one time we went there, and she said, this guy is this Dubside, and he can do rolling, and you want to demonstrate some rolling. So I showed them some rolling, and they looked and watched, and I guess they were impressed to do it, that I was doing it. And then she said, you can teach some of them if they want to learn how to roll. So I worked with some of them, and they would various degrees. It's hard. It's a different kind of thing. But I remember this one kid, and I said, okay, let's see if you can get this roll working. Now, you want to come over here? And he goes, no, I don't want to. And I thought, what? Like, it threw me off, because normally with adults, they're paying me money, please, try to get me to do this. But with kids, if somebody else said, here, you can learn how to roll, go work with this guy, that doesn't mean they want to. And it's I'm not used to people who just don't want to do that, And I remember there was one kid, then I realized that the kids are being brought to this daily kayak thing. It was like a week-long thing Barb had with the same group of kids. It's babysitting, like they just don't want the kids around the house. And these kids, they're not that interested in kayaking. I remember there was this one kid, and he didn't want to get in the water, so he just sat on the land, on the picnic table the whole time, for like 4 or 5 hours.
There you go.
And so, people who aren't motivated to do something, or their only motivation is someone else to push them into it, is a whole different way to, deal with if you're trying to teach somebody anything, if they don't really want to learn.
Yeah. I would be concerned, from what Brian Schultz has said about traumatizing kids.
Oh, yeah.
And having them had such a bad experience that they'll never want to touch a kayak again.
Yeah, well, that's where the instructor needs to work carefully. Like when I described how I work with Karen Marie in the water, and if they're afraid, you got to be there to support them and never let them be underwater panicking. If you keep pulling them up, fast enough until they know they expect that. And I remember one time, it wasn't a kid, it was an adult, one of my times instructing. And there's somebody, and she said, this woman said, I think that was the one where she'd had a near drowning experience as a kid that she remembered. And that was traumatic. And so I worked with her slowly. And I had her, going over and bringing her back up and bringing her over. And I think we might have gone up to the 180. I mean, the 360 all the way around. At some point, she said to me, "Can you let me stay down there a little bit longer? Don't pull me up." And then she realized what she had just said. She goes, "Whoa, I'm not afraid to be underwater there." And it was quite a revelation. So with kids, you don't want them to be underwater panicking, because that imprints on your mind the bad things. So you stay hands on and bring them right up, so they never have to struggle.
Mm-hmm.
But kids, as far as like kids are super flexible. They're like Gumbies compared to adults. So you don't have too many problems if you got them in gear that fits properly. They can do lay back and twist and turn, and that's not their biggest obstacle as it is on some adults. So,
have you seen kids rolling? I mean, how young are the youngest kids that have you seen rolling, either in the United States or in Greenland?
Let me think. I like pre-teenager. I don't know if I've seen any. Maybe like a 10 or 11-year-old, maybe once.
Okay.
Like so for many years in Greenland, the younger kids didn't roll, but then there was some. That new club had really worked with some of the guys, and they had some. So they were starting a lot sooner with the kids rolling. I think because they have a pool, indoor swimming pool in Nuuk, so they can have that advantage. But in this country, at the Sticks event, they would get kids. They'd get them comfortable in the water. And they'd just have them start trying like a balance race and stuff with the kayaks that fit them, small kayaks. And they were, probably 10, 11-year-old kids.
Yeah, I've seen them practicing balance races too, and it's pretty impressive. It's a great demonstration of the power of Greenland techniques. It's so easy, even a kid can do it. Well, on that note, let's proceed to episode number 27. And this is an episode I'm sure nobody is going to want to miss. This is the episode that you've all been waiting for, where Dubside finally reveals the secret to becoming an expert kayak roller.
Yes, indeed. Well, here it is.
Welcome to the Dubcast with Dubside. This is Dubcast number 27. And I'm going to give you the secret of being an expert at rolling a kayak. And that secret, in one word, I'll tell you right now, is yoga. That's right, yoga. That is how you become an expert kayak roller. Music this week from another fine Greenlandic female vocalist. Her name is Tupaarnaq. And unlike Nina or Julie or Stine or Rena or Marina or Katsi, Tupaarnaq is a real Greenlandic name. Tupaarnaq. Yeah. Have you ever known anybody who gets up in the morning and the first thing they do is they go outside and run? And it may be not a marathon, but a good distance. Well, when I was much younger, probably in my 20s, there were some people I knew who, at least they said they did this, and I thought that was, a good thing to do to stay healthy, for fitness. You get up in the morning and go running. So I started to do that, and it lasted about a week and a half. And then I think I was feeling sick or had a cold or something like that, so I stopped doing it and didn't start again. And maybe, I don't know, a year later, I was going to go back. I said, yeah, I got to start running again. So I tried it, and it lasted maybe, less than a week. It just didn't solidify, didn't become an actual habit. Well, the next thing I tried was yoga, and I found some community classes being offered somewhere, and went to that. There was, it was a 6-week session or something like that, once a week. And I got familiar with, basic yoga idea. You got the downward dog thing going on, sun salutations and stuff like that. And it was all right. But after this 6 week was up, I did not continue. It just wasn't feeling it. And some years went by. I was still riding a bike all over the place, so I was get exercise from that, but not a really intense workout through all the various muscles in the body. And then at some point later, this is 1998, as I may have mentioned in the past, I bought a kayak, a folding kayak, and took up kayaking. And it wasn't until 2001 when I went to the Kayak USA event called the Delmarva Paddlers Retreat, held early October in Delaware every year. It was at that event that they did yoga in the early morning. And being an early morning person, I got up and went to the yoga. And the guy there at the time, I haven't seen him in years, but a guy named Dan Smith was leading the yoga. And the two biggest things I remember him saying was that one is that yoga encompasses a very large body of knowledge and philosophy and various things. And the yoga postures are one little small percentage of that. But you don't have to embrace the entire thing to get plenty of benefit out of just doing the postures. And the other thing he said, which made a big impression on me, was at the end of the session, they did the one where you lie on the floor called Shavasana, and you finish from that, and he said, all the good in me recognizes all the good in you. And that is conveyed using the Sanskrit word Namaste. And I thought that was a profound sentiment. All the good in me recognizes all the good in you. We're all composed of some good and not so good and some bad components. And so to acknowledge that the good things that I do have in me, we'll deal with those. And the good things you have in you, I'm going to recognize those and acknowledge those and honor those. And if we all just emphasize the positive, that would be a good world. So somehow that impressed upon me that yoga was good for kayaking. And once I knew that, once I had that thought in mind, I'm like, okay, I am all about yoga. And I went back to some of the places I'd heard about before that offered yoga in Philadelphia on a regular basis, signed up there, and I was doing yoga almost as fanatically as I was doing rolling. While I learned the rolls, I was learning the yoga. Well, back in those days, I think I had the one roll working when I first went to Delmarva, a couple rolls, but I couldn't quite get the balance brace, where you lay into the side, lay on your back in the water, float out to the side. And I did finally start to get it using other kayaks. I got in one of those Nigel Dennis Romanis, which rolls quite nicely, but I couldn't get it in my Feathercraft K-Lite until I started to modify that kayak and chop down the back rib, made a new rib for it so it would be lower in the back. And then I started to be able to do more rolls. And I got the balance brace working then. And so, about 2 years later, I could look at this up in my logbook, but suffice it to say, 2 years later, after 2 years of regular yoga, getting really into yoga, without really knowing how much more flexibility I might have gained, I got the idea to put the kayak together in its original stock configuration. That's with the high back rib and the back seat back that sticks up above the deck. And I put it together that way. It makes it much harder to roll if you're going to do layback rolls. And I tried to do the balance brace that way, and I could. And that's what 2 years of yoga did. It gave I could tilt my back, arch my back over that deck that much easier after gaining the flexibility from yoga. And so in my first rolling video, I say, and you can quote me on this, you cannot go wrong taking up yoga to be a better paddler. So you can apply that to paddling in general, not just rolling a kayak. And when I first met Sherry Perry, I discovered that she is a big proponent of yoga. And when I met Helen Wilson, she was very enthusiastic about yoga as well. And it figures. Well, both Sherry and Helen pursued their yoga passion further by getting Instructor Certification. And I think that involves 100, 200 hours of instruction. And so I looked at that, because I seemed interesting to me. But in my traveling, I was never somewhere in one place long enough to go through the whole program, whether they did the intense 2 or 3 month version or the extended weekends for half a year or something like that. But it just didn't quite work out, and the cost was somewhat of a concern. It's a couple $1,000s. But both Sherry and Helen did that, and so then they would lead classes and at these kayak events. But I looked into what if you wanted to pursue that as an occupation, what a typical yoga instructor gets paid. Your entry level jobs are teaching at gyms and stuff, and it's going to take you a long time to recoup your investment of a couple thousand certifications. So I laid off on that. Didn't go that route. But some years later, I was the first time was at an event in Finland, a kayak symposium there. They'd had me as one of the guest instructors, and there were people it's a weekend thing, and just a drive from Helsinki, and there was a demand for yoga at this event. It was maybe 100 people, that kind of thing. They'll camped out in this area on the coastal shoreline. And so at some point somebody knew that I was into yoga, so the organizers said, Dubside, could you lead the yoga in the morning, the next 2 mornings, on Friday and Saturday, or Saturday, Sunday? And I said, well, I'm not certified. I don't have the training in that. And they said, we don't care. Can you do that? I said, all right, if you don't care, I'll go for it. So I led the yoga for those 2 days in the morning, and people seemed to enjoy it. There weren't no major disaster. And so at the end, when we settled up, they were working out the payment, and I said, I did teach those yoga classes, which meant I had to get up early and do some mental preparation. If you could hook me up for that. And they thought about it. They said, oh, yeah, okay. And so they added some amount of, I guess, euros is what they pay in Finland, and I got paid for teaching yoga, even though I wasn't certified, and they didn't even mind that I was not certified. And since that time, I have gone to all the events I usually go to in the U.S., and if there's no certified instructors around, they will ask me to teach the yoga, and I make sure they know I'm not certified, and they say, doesn't worry, it doesn't matter. So I'll lead the yoga, and people at least seem to have appreciate what I do. And sometimes I've had people come to me at these things, and they'll say, I've got this pain in the shoulder here, and they're asking for, what about it? And I said, look, I have no expertise in that level. Whatever I told you would just make it worse. I have no no standing to give you input on your own personal injury or hurt, pain situation, so don't even ask, please. And when I'm traveling, I'll usually find a yoga studio or somewhere where they're doing yoga, and just go in, and it's you get a very wide range of experiences. I can think of places like I was in Denmark somewhere, and the guy just looked online and said, "Yeah, just down the street here, there's yoga." I went down there, and I go in, and there's this woman. There was maybe like 6 or 7 people. It was a great big room, mostly empty. And she's got these notes next to her on the piece of paper on the floor. And she's looking down. She goes, "Okay, now we're going to do downward dog." And I said, "Oh, what, did she just get certified yesterday? All right." And I've been to other places where it's like the room is packed, 35, 40 people all stuffed into this room. And the instructor, something's going on when they've got the room that full. And the instructor's just really fit, really dynamic, just great, presentation and everything. And that's some happening yoga. And there's a group energy when you get a lot of people all doing yoga together. And I've seen it, the most I've ever seen that effect happening is in Miami a couple years back when I was there. They have, the weather in Miami is warm just about all the time. So they year-round, I believe, they have right downtown, there's a outdoor park area there, and they have free yoga. Yeah, I think it's maybe 2 or 3 times a week. There's a sort of a stage platform that's used for other things, but that's where they do the yoga. And so the stage, it's a large platform, is covered with people with their mats. And even out past the stage, people back there. And there are maybe 100 people all doing yoga together, and it is so empowering. We're here in this park, and we are doing yoga. And if you go out to a park by yourself and you do yoga, and people can look at you funny, and you just have to sort of assert yourself. But with 100 people, boy, you are there. 100 people doing anything together is a force to be reckoned with. I've been to places where they have that hot yoga, which is the first time I did that. I think I had the guest membership. You get 2 weeks for $20 or something like that. And I think I went there, and maybe it was a month. I think as I recall, I went there 18 days straight, every day doing hot yoga. And it took me a couple days to get a hang of it. Not to stand right under the radiant heater up on the wall. That's the hotter than usual spot. And you do have to wash your clothes each time, because otherwise you go in there from the day before and people start saying it's a funny smell in there. But the best time, my favorite part of hot yoga is when you finish and you walk out the door at the end and that cool air hits you. Oh, that's nice. And there is a big innovation in kayaking, combining kayaking with yoga, which involves the stand-up paddle boards, which aren't quite kayaks, but they're something that floats on the water. And so the sup yoga, you do the yoga postures on this board floating in water. So the balance ones are much more challenging. But the shavasana at the end is very peaceful, because you just feel the water, the ripples and the waves back and forth, and it's very relaxing. Now there's a posture. I had to learn some of these Sanskrit names. It's just working hard enough learning the Greenlandic names of things. For years I never learned any of the yoga names, but I made an effort after a while. So it's called Sursasana, and that in English we would say the headstand. And that's not a beginner posture, So you sort of put your elbows down, and you put your head, the back of your head, the top of your head is taking the weight along with your elbows, and then you're sort of in that little tripod formation. Then you get your both legs straight up into the air. And I've done a lot of yoga in gyms. A gym that'll have yoga classes, because, it's a lot cheaper. But the gym yoga, it tends to be, gym yoga. It's not nearly as intense or detailed as the real yoga, studio yoga, but it's a lot cheaper. The gym membership includes the yoga classes, so you can go to those. And I was involved in those a lot for a long time, just because it's the cheapest way to go. But they generally never did any headstands in that one, in gym yoga. And I imagine, maybe they used to, but it was probably one of those, insurance situations. Somebody somewhere, some place in the country, some instructor had the students doing headstand. Usually you start with doing it against a wall, so you have the wall to support you, but maybe they were doing it just out in the open, and somebody fell over, and it was like, bowling pins, knocked out the whole front row, one after the other. Yeah, I don't know if people got hurt, but so then they, I'm sure the word went out, okay, no more headstands. Insurance doesn't cover it, and so they never did headstands anymore. So now if you want to work on a real headstand, you have to go to a yoga studio. The shoulder stand is the easier version where you just sort of on the back of your shoulders, but the headstand is, I like the headstand. So it's a very, very impressive to do headstands on a paddleboard, on a stand-up paddleboard. And I am going to tell you a secret, a tip from Dubside. Now, of course, we have to preface this by saying that disclaimer here, anything you're trying, you're on your own. Don't blame me if you hurt yourself. If you are prone to problems or injuries or things, you know better than that. So do not try this if you're cautious, if you're worried about hurting yourself, and if you do hurt yourself, it is your responsibility. Don't sue me. You yourself bear all the liability. Okay, so to do a headstand on land, you got your elbows on the floor and the top of your head is on the floor, and your hands are cupping the back of your head, and you're reaching up, straightening out your knees so you get both your feet straight up in the air. Now, doing this on a stand-up paddleboard is much harder, apparently much harder, because you have, the whole board is unstable. But I am going to give you the secret to make it's actually easier doing it this way than it is on land, and you can impress your friends. Well, to give you the background on this, in May of 2014 at Kayak Academy in Seattle, they had found a yoga instructor willing to do the SUP, stand-up paddleboard yoga, and they had started introductory classes. So I got in on the first time they tried it. And they had this instructor who was incredibly flexible. And there were maybe 9 or 10 of us in the water on stand-up paddleboards. And we went through the basic down dog, etc. And then this instructor, she does headstand. And we were all looking at her and attempting, and I'm going for it. And I had holding that posture for maybe a quarter of a second before I had to let my legs down so I don't go splashing into the water. And she's just in front of us, standing there like a statue, upside down with her feet straight up in the air, like it's no problem. And I had my little waterproof camera. I was taking pictures of when I wasn't doing the postures, pull out the camera and take some shots. So I had a shot of her doing the headstand. And the next year, in 2015, I was at the Charleston, South Carolina event. And in between teaching classes, I went out to try some of the things displayed there. And they had some stand-up paddleboards, and I've got no objections to stand-up paddleboards. I was trying one. There's a guy I know there named Kit, who's a dealer for various kayaks. And Kit showed me a trick that to use when you do a headstand. And he said, I can't even do a headstand on land, but on the stand-up paddleboard, he was doing it. And he showed me, and he's a fit guy, but he's no super athlete, but he's knocking it out. And he showed me the secret. All you got to do is, instead of cupping the back of your head with your hands, you reach your hands out to the side of the paddleboard and grip it with your thumbs on top and your fingers underneath. And that makes all the difference, because on land, all you can do is push down with one hand or the other. You can't pull up with your hand. There's nothing to pull on. On a stand-up paddleboard, with fingers under the paddleboard, you can pull as well as push. And this gives you a tremendous advantage in control. And I was able to do it just like the instructor in Seattle. And when I got home, I looked in my photo album and noticed, yes, that's what she was doing. She had her hands on the edge of the paddleboard. Well, the last time I did yoga in a yoga studio, I was in Madison, Wisconsin, and this was March of 2020, I believe it was. And there's a big symposium called Canoecopia that I was scheduled to go and teach. I think they were going to have me doing a rolling demonstration in the pool. I'd done that way back, about 10 years before that. And it was all set, and we got there. And so remember, this is 2020. I took a train to Madison from the D.C. area. And I got on the train, and after I was on the train, since I don't carry a cell phone, the word came back to the people I live with that the event had been canceled because they had just put out Wisconsin had just declared, no gatherings of people over, 10 or 20 people or something like that. So the organizers of that symposium had it all lined up, ready to go, had to cancel the whole thing. So I got to Madison, and there was the people I was staying with, they came there as well because they'd already paid for the place, and we just walked around Madison and looked at the town for a couple days that weekend, but there was no symposium going on. And so I found the place I was staying was right around the corner from a yoga studio. So I went over there and I said, could I sign up for one class? And they said, oh, okay, well, I think they were doing, you have to wear a mask. And they had taken all the props, you have like blankets and foam blocks and straps, and they put those all away because they weren't going to share any gear. And I think you had to bring your own mat, so I came up with a mat somewhere. And so they did yoga, and it was okay, a decent class. You were supposed to stay 6 feet apart on the yoga mats if they could fit that many people in the room. And the next day, I had the whole weekend to be in Madison with nothing else to do. So I went back for the next morning they had a class scheduled then. And there was a sign on the door that said, that the instructor couldn't make it, or maybe the instructor came down with COVID. I don't know. So the class was canceled. No class there. And I think the Sunday when I was leaving to take the train back, I went past the yoga studio, and they had said, we are officially closed completely. It was the onset of the COVID thing, and that was what we were all going through back then. So just the very beginning of that, and but hopefully by now they've gotten back into doing things, or yoga online and those sorts of things. But that was what happened in Madison that year. Well, I hope you are inspired to take up yoga or continue it if you haven't taken it up already, to be a better paddler or to be a more healthy person. Yoga is a great thing. Music this week comes from a woman named Tupaarnaq Mathiusen. And she is in the generation with Julie and Nina and those folks. So she's been around for quite some time. And she's featured on that the CD I told you about last time called Zedna. And Tupaarnaq, she put out an album that I got probably in 2006 or 2008, and it's called Ishlit. And this was on my hit list for a long time. She's got some really nice stuff on there. So the song I'm going to give you my version of, it's called Ushlut Tamasa. Translates to every day.
Ekagigana tamani uhagut Mashnuin ashtuta asakaluta Duan ashtutami inuvugut Imitsu nuinak isigaluta Ushtutamasa Ekayu ashtutit Uyona veshtutit Na bikusushtutit Sulimi ekamane pina Mani me mana huanga kisima Sumana dasa ishlit kisivit Ekingu titumi avisa bugut Misilikin isamumi Neriupula Ushlutamasa massa Eka ju ashtit Ui ona veshdutit Na piku sushdutit Sulimi eka manepina Ushdutamasa Eka ju ashdutit Ui ona veshdutit Na piku sushdutit Sulimi eka manepina
Song called Ushlutamasa, originally done by Tupaarnaq from an album called Ishlit. And I think of Greenlandic music, as I've said once before, as divided into two periods. There is before Nanook and after Nanook. And this comes from the before Nanook period. So the Elsner brothers weren't involved in this production because they were probably quite young at the time. But Tupaarnaq does not write her material. This is all songs done by, there's a production team in Greenland, and one of the main characters there, big name in Greenlandic music, Mick Christensen. He's a producer, arranger, engineer, and he's written these songs along with somebody else. Most of the music is his responsibility. And there is one English song on this CD, sung in English, called Fly High, but I don't think it's as good as the Greenlandic songs. But you can decide for yourself by going to atlanticmusic.gl and picking up the CD yourself. It's called Ishlit by Tupaarnaq. And if you happen to get that Zedna CD I talked about in episode 26, that has two songs done on it by Tupaarnaq. And there's also a CD that this producer Mick Christensen did with Tupaarnaq. It's called Northern Light, which is all in English. But I don't think it's nearly as good as this one, Ishlit, or the stuff off of Zedna. Coming up in episode 28, while we're on the subject of fitness and health, maybe I'll talk about injuries that have occurred in my experience with kayaking, some to me, some to other people around me. I'll give you the story on that next week. Until then, this is Dubside saying namaste.